The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for our fifth training webinar on evolution, the fourth one rather. And this one is talking about testing and deploying with evolution. Oliver is going to show you some of the new features that we have added into evolution in regards to API testing, and also how our licensing and deployment will work. So, Oliver, you want to begin?
Thank you, Riaz. Okay, everyone. So first up, we're going to talk about some of the new features that are in the version of Evolution that's going to be released very shortly after this webinar. The main areas that we made adjustments is in making things easier to use overall. Although there are some other large areas we've addressed. One of them is we've added full SOAP support in this version. I'll show you guys that in a little bit. And the SOAP support works just like the JSON support. It's very simple to use, just a selection that you pick for that. Another one of the things that we got some feedback on, so you know, of course, we're very thankful to those that have been able to test Evolution out and try it for us, is this Evolution port detection feature, where if you happen to be running some other service on a specific port, Evolution will now detect this and basically throw an error to you and suggest that you run on a different port. So it just makes it a little bit easier to use, especially when you're setting it up if you haven't quite done something like this before. So that's another one of the new items added in here. Also, we've added a development mode selection screen. And this is really meant for developers to be able to test Evolution out very easily. And this runs from the studio, but it also runs outside of the studio, and we'll show you this. Basically, it lets you select a port and protocol to run Evolution on without having to do any code changes. Additionally, we've updated the API interface to support SOAP and made various other tweaks to it as well. And we now have a beta of the deployment version of Evolution so that you can, on a trial basis, run a full Evolution server. And the installer for this includes the ability to run in a silent mode, where you could, for instance, bake it into your own installation. But probably the largest thing that we changed is that the Evolution developer license is free. So we've decided on the licensing for the developer version, which is the beta version that you guys have been using, that is meant for developing your APIs with, and that's going to remain free. So the next version of it no longer has an expiration date on it, and you know, you are free to use it for development purposes. There's no licensing costs associated with it. So, you know, we think that'll really help you guys get your Evolution-based API applications off the ground. So, the areas that we're going to talk about really are related to this testing and deployment. And the first area I wanted to talk about in relation to this is the difference between unit testing and functional testing. Evolution really has a solution for functional testing. Unit testing is also a very important part of an API development process, though. And in fact, unit tests are often created before code is written. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult, though, to understand what the difference is between unit testing and functional testing. And so, you know, I describe it here. Unit tests tell us that the code is doing things right, whereas functional tests tell us that code is doing the right things. So, as an example of that, you might think about a situation with a house being built, and you could think of the unit tests as kind of the position of a tradesman or maybe even a building inspector. And they're going to make sure that, of course, the wiring is put into code, that the same with the plumbing, that the structure is sound. and that everything is up to the standards of the building code in that area. That's the equivalent of unit testing. You're making sure that those sort of underlying structures are being implemented the right way. Functional testing, in this example, kind of relates to the position of the homeowner. So with functional testing, it's not related to, well, is this pipe running in the right place? Is it too close to an electrical conduit or anything like that? The homeowner is worried about, when I turn on this faucet, do I get hot water? And when I turn on the other side, do I get cold water? Or if I flip this light switch, do my lights come on? Those are the sorts of things that functional testing take the place of. So rather than is this returning the right structure, those sorts of things, is the data I'm getting back right? Is it doing what it's supposed to do on the back end? Or the business rules implemented properly? And really the API testing that's built into Evolution is to help you with that sort of functional testing, although really it is just one piece of that. So how do you go about testing an Evolution API? Well, the API interface, the APEYE interface that we have built in, is intended to be used not only by back-end developers, but also by front-end developers. And back-end developers, of course, can use this immediately to test and refine their API calls as they're developing them, to see the sort of data output they're getting. And really, it gives you a means by which you can try this stuff out instantly before it goes through any sort of other testing you may have, or before it's touched by a front-end developer at all. From the standpoint of a front-end developer, can do a lot more, though, and really that's where we see a lot of the benefit as well, is for front-end developers, so that they can see some of the input and output without writing any code. And part of this is that for a front-end developer, being able to visualize an API call, actually see it taking place, can be very beneficial. And actually, to kind of get an idea about this, we're going to talk to one of our front-end developers. We're going to talk to Aaron Gulak, who, of course, many of you have heard present. He did our last presentation, where we were implementing a user interface to an Evolution API. And so we're going to talk to Aaron a bit about how he has used the API testing interface with Evolution. Thank you for joining us, Aaron.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, Oliver.
So, Aaron, can you tell me why having this sort of, from your viewpoint, why having an API testing interface is so much better than just maybe even having documentation about an API?
Yeah, definitely. Well, for me, when I'm building a front end for a web application, it's hard sometimes when you're reading the documentation to really get a feel for what the call is going to be like. A lot of times, different functions, different calls on the API can perform a lot differently. For example, one may maybe have to go to a third-party source or something, and because of that, it can be a lot slower. And so visually, as a developer, I might need to do something where I let the user know, maybe a progress update or something on that call, let them know that this call may take a little bit longer. So there's certain things like that that can come up that documentation really just doesn't cut it. You don't see until you actually go in, use this test interface, make the call, and really get an idea of how it feels. So that's one big advantage with using one of these testing interfaces for sure.
Yeah.
Another thing that I found is just with the documentation, essentially there's a person that's responsible for that documentation, and so it's very easy as the application grows for the documentation to maybe become out of date. Maybe some things have changed in the way a call is made, and so I end up having to go and talk to the actual backend developer a little bit on that. So with this testing interface, that's it's ensured that that's always up to date, because that's based on the actual code. And so I know when I go there and I'm looking at the calls, the parameters I need, the parameters I get back, those are the up-to-date ones. Those are the ones that I need to implement.
What about dealing with special situations? It seems like almost every application has something that is a little bit specialized to that application that maybe you haven't seen before. Do you find it beneficial in those situations as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think usually the basic CRUD operations, reading a table or adding something to a table, those are pretty standard, and as long as I know the structure I'm using, it's pretty straightforward. But yeah, really when you start doing custom stuff, you really see the benefit of something like this API testing interface, because sometimes you need to pass weird parameters, sometimes you get weird stuff back, and even just the simple fact of being able to get that kind of weird data and even just copying and pasting it from the API interface, I can start to implement it into the application way easier.
Yeah. Okay. And so I think probably what we should do is kind of show some of what Aaron's talking about here. So we're going to go ahead and actually show you, talk about a couple other things real quick, and then we're going to come back to Aaron and do a little follow-up with them. Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, no problem.
So one of the areas I want to address real quick before we get into this is a concept called CORS, which is cross-origin resource sharing, before we show the testing interface. And really this is something that all of the browsers implement to stop cross-site scripting attacks that were occurring. And basically what it means is that a website loaded from one domain can't, without proper CORS permissions, call an API from a different domain at all, period. It's blocked entirely unless you have, on this other domain, you have to have what are called these CORS headers that say this other domain has permission to call me, basically. And when you're testing various things, CORS can be a real pain. I think Aaron can attest to that. We've hit across CORS issues in various projects using other APIs, correct?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's always been an issue.
And essentially, what we decided to do with Evolution is build CORS in right out of the box. So there's no setup for dealing with this. CORS is supported right out of the box. You can make these cross-origin calls if you want to with Evolution without any problem, and it makes the development process a lot easier. We found that with other APIs we may have to consume even, they may not inherently have CORS support, and you have to go onto the server and build support in for them. And so we decided to put that in, and it really makes testing things a lot easier, because oftentimes you'll be testing something where the HTML and JavaScript, for instance, may be coming from your local file system, and being able to test some of that from a local call would fire off the CORS protection in your browser, and so having that built in has been a real big boost for us that way. So let's go ahead and show you some of this. So right off the bat, I'm actually going to show you the deployment installer for Evolution. I don't have Evolution installed on this machine right now, and we're going to talk about the deployment installer a little bit later, but this machine has our order entry demo already installed on it, but it doesn't have Evolution running on it yet. If I go in here, I can see that we've got our order entry here, we've got our Evolution order here, but we don't have Evolution. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to install Evolution on here, the deployment version of Evolution. And this machine happens to already have Apache, so I'm not going to do the Apache part of this. We'll go ahead and do the rest. Okay, and we'll finish this up here. And this is the evolution administrator that installs as part of the deployment. I don't have a license right now, but I'm going to go ahead and request an evaluation license. Okay, so now I have an evaluation license, and as you can see, I already had some evolution applications in the registry, so it detected them and brought them right in. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the deployment section. I'm just going to go ahead and start a couple of these services here. Okay, we're going to go in here and take a look at some of this. So this is the evolution testing interface, the API testing interface. And one of the first things that you'll notice is that we bring in a list of all of the methods that you have exposed in your application. This ends up making it very easy to, of course, see what's available for you to use. And you know, when we compare to other testing interfaces, this is something very common that you'll see. And in fact, if you're using this API tool separately, if you have your server set up right, you can get it to do this. But we've actually customized this API interface quite a bit by adding in the ability to see the various parameters that you need to work with here. So, for instance, if I select the user login method, it actually builds for me the JSON data that I need to pass to this method. It tells me the types of all of the data fields that are in here as well. So I can go in here, fill in the password just like you could from the website, and then I can see the results of that call over here. Now, you'll see some of the course-related stuff right in here. This access control allow origin, that's one of the course headers that we have in here. Access control allows headers. This is one specifically for SOAP that we have in here as well. And so I can go ahead from here and, for instance, take this, which is needed for many of the calls in evolution, in this API at least. We're going to go about doing a call on, oh, maybe we'll do a find customer. So we'll go in here and put our session string in. And 100 and a find direction of 2, and let's see if we find it. There we go. Okay. So from the standpoint of someone developing a front end against this, how might they sit down and use this? Well, hopefully you'll have documentation that may go along with this that will tell them, okay, this is what you use this call for, and for instance, it'll tell them the valid values on this. So if I go ahead and pass something like, 7 on here, right? Our API actually detects that and tells you that the find direction must be between 0 and 4, but it doesn't tell you what 3 means, for instance, in here. That sort of thing isn't in here. And so, having the ability to do that, of course, you still need your documentation, but even if some of that is missing, and front-end developer can use this testing interface to try out your calls and see what type of responses he's getting from it. So it's very possible that, for instance, you may have documented what the result data looks like, and but when they're actually developing against it, being able to have sample data to use, for instance, trying out the calls ends up being very beneficial. And the same thing goes for SOAP calls. SOAP calls are a little bit more complex, but let's go ahead and look at this. So after I installed Evolution, you notice I've got this whole domain. Of course, there's some setup in relation to this that I did doing a domain map here, but essentially, as I mentioned, I have Apache already installed on here, and I went ahead and set up a reverse proxy, and we're going to show that a little later. But just so you know how this is working here, I could very easily go to an address, an internal address like this, that it's running on and bypass the Apache layer that we have here. So in this case, I'm bypassing the reverse proxy that we have set up and showing you this is more like the address that you would see if you were setting up Evolution and hadn't done anything else at this point. And I've actually gone to a little bit different running Evolution application. I've gone to a SOAP-based one. You can see here I'm running on port 8082 with the SOAP protocol. Now, you'll notice that I'm running the Evo order samples still, and that they're identical. The interface that you expose is completely independent of what you have built into your application. So when I set up this pool, I determine this sort of protocol that's being used here, and transport and all of those options are determined independently of what's in the application. So in this case, I've set up a SOAP-based application, and we have exactly the same calls exposed here. So for instance, I could come over here and take my session. I'm going to go ahead and take my session ID here, and I can bring it into here, paste this in, and I'm going to try and find an order 199 maybe, and do a find equal and send. And you'll see here that my session was validated still because, of course, in this case, I'm running the very same executable in a different pool, so my session is still valid. And I'm able to see the SOAP-based response. Now, of course, the SOAP responses are quite a bit more difficult to decode on your own here, but not too bad. You can see, we have our phone number here, and you can see the data type gets put on each item. Credit limit, you can see, is stored as a double here. Being able to see this without having to write a single line of code until you actually are sitting down and using it, I think sometimes it's a little bit difficult to see that benefit, but really it helps so very, very much. The interface here also, as you can see, we went through and color-coded all of the type data to make all of this easier to read in here. So all of these things are a little bit different than the defaults that you're going to get in many other tools to make it easier to use. And of course, this testing interface has another feature to it that can be really useful at certain times. There's this raw button that we have up here. So if I go ahead and click on this raw button, I get a pop-up. And in this case, it lets me see the raw HTTP request and response that occurred rather than the JSON RPC only piece of this request. So like, for instance, the additional details on the request, there really isn't much. I can see that we have that a JSON RPC request is a post-based request. And I can see that it specified a host name in here. But other than that, I just have the call data. But if I go into the response, sometimes you'll see additional headers. You can see the content length and some of that stuff. Of course, we have some of that buried in our response here as well. But you can see the return code from the server. So for instance, if I were to change this, you can see here my return code. Actually, I return a different HTTP error code in the header here, and to indicate that we've had an error occur. That can be very useful too, because a lot of times documentation doesn't specify information about how error states actually show themselves. A lot of times we've seen that missing from documents all over the place for APIs. They don't tell you about that. Being able to see that, okay, not only do we get an error code in here, but that's generated from Evolution, a proper JSON RPC error code, we're also getting an HTTP error code as well. That's important, of course, because it means that rather than having to have if code or various things in your JavaScript or wherever you're calling this from to deal with an error situation looking for an error in the JSON data, you can have a different handler, which is very common in JavaScript, to deal with an HTTP error code other than a 200, for instance, and it'll take you into a whole different segment of your code. So those sorts of little details are very helpful to have a testing interface for and be able to see that error states are working properly as well. So with that in mind, I wanted to ask one more question of Aaron here, a couple more questions. Having seen some of this here, how does the test interface that comes with Evolution, how does this compare to what you've seen from other API tools or other APIs in general?
Yeah, well, the real benefit when you start using this Evolution testing interface is kind of, you hinted at it, but it's kind of this idea of formatting the request data already ready for you. And we see the benefit here on these different calls. You see exactly what you need to pass. You see what type it needs to be. And it really makes it easy for you to just start testing things right away. And JSON is JSON is what's used in JavaScript, so that's not as difficult. But the real benefit comes when you switch to SOAP, because, XML is not really something that you, at least me specifically, have a lot of experience writing, and it can be a little more complex. So having that already built for you, and you just essentially need to plug in the data, it's a huge time saver.
And what about from the standpoint of, when you work with other APIs, do you see a lot of them that are providing testing interfaces regularly? Are they providing you any information related to, for instance, what the parameters are, stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely not. There's APIs I've worked with that don't give me any kind of testing interface, and it's more just based on going and talking to someone and figuring out what the calls need to look like and what they even are. But definitely there's not any out there I've worked with that provide the kind of parameter support that these do, in terms of having it already built for you. As soon as you select a call, your parameters are essentially built for you as a template. That's definitely something that I haven't seen elsewhere.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's the API testing interface. I really think that as you guys work with it some more, you'll really see some of these benefits. We've done a couple other things to help you along the way in your testing that I'd like to show you. We talked about that new kind of developer screen that we have. So I'm going to go ahead and show that now as well. So normally, if you were to run an Evolution-based application, or if it was even a native web app-based application, and you were to try to run it outside of the environment that it was built for, essentially it just doesn't work at all. In this version of Evolution, though, we decided to provide an interface for just that situation, so that you can still do some testing with your application without necessarily, on a deployment server even, without necessarily having to set up another test pool or things like that. And so this same executable, which was started inside of the dispatcher here, if I go and run this outside of the dispatch interface, just try and run the executable, I get a different user interface. Well, I get a user interface right off the bat. We have this Evolution application controller that comes up, and essentially this is running that very same executable, but it's giving you the interface that you're going to see in the developer edition or the developer license of Evolution. You're going to see this screen come up when you test an Evolution application, and if you run an Evolution application outside of basically the management system for Evolution, you'll also see this interface. And this interface lets you pick a protocol and a port to serve the interface provided on right from here. So rather than having it hard-coded or having changed the code from the default port 8081 that we had set up before, you can now do that right from the user interface. So for instance, If I were to try and run this right now, I'm going to get an error. And I got an error in this case because, of course, we already have something listening on that port, and that's part of that new port detection that we have in there to make it a little bit clearer if, that something has gone wrong here. So I'm going to go ahead and run the JSON RPC interface, but I'm going to run it on port, I think 8083 is okay. Let's go ahead and run that. Okay, now I switched screens all of a sudden. That's another one of the things that we have in here. Once you go ahead and start it, it actually will bring up this testing interface for you just by clicking the Start Evolution button and give me the full testing interface available in that executable. Now, in this case, it's the very same interface that we have in our deployment version, but it's that easy to basically get your evolution application in a testable state now. It's super easy. We tell you where it is. We take you to the web page where you can do your testing immediately. So it just takes some of those unknowns out of it. If you hadn't done some of this before with, for instance, putting a port number on the end of an IP address, some of those things, we just wanted to make it that much easier for you. So I'll go ahead and close this now. I'll close my tab here. That same interface is the one that you're going to see from the studio as well. So that's available to you at all times while you're using your developer license. And the idea of putting it in here is so that, for instance, let's say you've gotten your DataFlex license set up and running. You can come right in here after that point, and you can install the deployment version of Evolution, and just with that installed, without any pools set up for Evolution, you can test to make sure everything's running properly, rather than when you're running in a service mode, for instance, if something goes wrong, as any Windows service would do, we're writing into the event log. So, if there's something messed up or whatever with a path for your data or something like that, you're going to see errors that appear in the event log. Whereas if you run it outside of the service, of course, you're going to get errors right on the screen here. So it's just one of those things to help you guys get set up a little bit faster. So that's the testing interface. Let's talk now about deployment. As you saw from the installation, we wanted to go for a very simple deployment. Everything that you need to get Evolution up and running is built into our deployment installer. You, of course, have to have whatever your application needs for installation on its own. If you use third-party controls or, of course, the DataFlex runtime, for instance, if it's a DataFlex-based application. But if it's, for instance, a C# based application like we have over here, the admin tool works across any language. So, for instance, I can go up and I can go here and start up a C# application, and now I'll have a testing interface for that running here. So, whatever your application needs, in this case, this is a C# based app, so I may need the .NET a specific version of the .NET runtime for that. So, but everything else is baked in to the Evolution installer, including, as you saw during the install, Apache. We have a full Apache installation included. We'll talk about that a little bit more. The installer, the Apache installation, as you saw, is optional, but if you do go ahead and install that, it sets it up automatically as a service, and Evolution is set up as a service as well. And like I mentioned, there's a silent mode with command line parameters that we'll have in the documentation, so that you could take this entire installer and bake it into an installation of your own, for instance, and not have to worry about where to put things, registry keys, anything like that. As you can see, the licensing setup is very simple as well. For a trial license, you just hit the request trial button, and it'll install a trial license for you, and then you have a 30-day trial that's available that way. And after an Evolution license is purchased, you'll get a registration code. You put that in, and then you will enable a permanent license as well. So that's all a very simple process. In addition to these aspects, the management aspect of Evolution is also, we tried to make it very simple to use. Now, Evolution has a little bit more complexity in it than some other tools from the standpoint of being able to have all these different protocols that you can run, having applications in various languages, and rather than deal with each of those on their own, we put this all into one management system, the admin UI. And the admin UI is used for everything that you'll need to do from that standpoint. So for instance, if you are wanting to set up a thrift-based application like this, we'll give you good defaults for thrift automatically. In general, we'll give you a good default port for that as well. If you're running a JSON RPC or SOAP-based application, we'll set those things up for you. And really, the only areas that you need to worry about are putting in your executable path. If you have command line parameters for selecting a workspace, possibly you may need to do that here. And then, of course, the number of processes allocated to that pool. Everything else in here, in general, the default should be what you need, although there are quite a few different options that that are exposed here that can be tweaked internally. In most cases, the very basic setup will work for you. And this is the case across any language. So, it's as simple as coming in here, adding a new application, filling in a couple of details, and saving it, and you're good to go at that point. Now, in addition to that, we also provided an MMC snap-in for IT departments. So MMC plugins or snap-ins are a little bit different beast, and in general, we find a lot of people, a lot of developers may not be as familiar with them. But go ahead and show you what this looks like here. So this is Microsoft Management Console. I can go ahead and add a snap-in for all kinds of stuff: certificate management, ActiveX controls. Basically, a lot of pieces of Windows are in here that you can basically create for yourself a very custom management view of your machine. And on that note, we added Evolution Server as a management console snap-in. And essentially, you're able to come in here and do the same sort of management right inside of here. Start service, stop service, that you would do with all the other aspects of Windows management. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, but it is available for you there as well. And I think for IT departments, they'll like having this available as an option, since they're used to working in MMC so much anyways, and you can say preferences related to it and all that sort of stuff is all just a part of that being built into MMC plugins. And this is really the Windows way of doing it. So that's why we wanted to include this. We also have the standalone utility, but for for IT shops that are really using all the features of Windows, they're gonna want this snap-in available to them. So I think having it available just makes it that much better in this case. So I'm going to save that at all. So we've got that there as well. The last item really to talk about is the customized version of Apache that we have here. And although it's a fairly standard Apache, we have done a few adjustments to the version of Apache that we're installing with Evolution. Right off the bat, in the configuration files for Apache, we've put samples of what a reverse proxy setup looks like. So if I were to go into the configuration here, we have this remarked out, and so this is the implementation for this server specifically. As you can see, I'm running quite a few reverse proxies. But we have basically remarked out examples of these built into the configuration file. Apache by default gets installed right into the root of the C drive. The configuration file is just a large text file May seem a little bit overwhelming, but in general, most of it you don't need to touch. And we've marked the spots that we think you're going to be most likely to need to adjust. We also went through and included the modules that are going to most commonly be used with an Evolution API-based application. So for instance, if I go back here, we've included the modules for proxying in here already. You don't have to worry about these proxy modules. They're already good to go in here, along with SSL support that's been enabled in here as well. Probably the most important thing we did, though, is this little fix right here for Internet Explorer 10 and 11. So as we were developing Evolution, we came across this weird bug. Took a little bit of time to track down, but essentially, if you were running Apache inside of a virtual machine, as many cloud-based applications may do, whether it was a Xen-based virtual machine or VMware, if you were trying to access this this Apache server, not even the Evolution server, just the Apache server from Internet Explorer 10 or 11, sometimes there would be a freezing issue that occurred. And what essentially was happening here is that there was a very funky interaction between the way Internet Explorer 10 and 11 send their requests, the way Apache handles them, and actually the network driver, the virtual machine network driver that sits in between the two. And so it's kind of a difficult bug to track down, but since we figured a lot of people may be doing something like this, we went ahead and included the bug fix directly in Apache for that. So none of you are going to be hitting that issue. We dealt with that for you. So there are various things like that that have been customized with the Apache install, and we've documented those things in the configuration file where we made those tweaks. But essentially, the Apache install is a very vanilla version of it. And so, for instance, if I go and look at, let's pull this. If I go look at our demo that we've shown so many times, this is all running through Apache right here. And essentially the way we've got this set up is this is a single page application, as Aaron showed some of the development on it before. And this application sits entirely inside of this folder. The htdocs folder is kind of like the web root folder that you would have for an IIS installation, and it's where you put all your HTML. And essentially, this entire application is simply some HTML files and some JavaScript files. You can see very few here, in fact, sitting in this folder, and then the configuration directives to enable the proxying to Evolution directly. And that's all there is to this application. It's actually very easy to get up and running with this. The Apache installation is going to serve files right off the bat for you after you install an Evolution server. So all of that is just ready to go for you right off the bat. And that's really all of the new features that we have in this version of Evolution. And of course, we're going to have this available. Most likely, we'll have this posted into the forums by tomorrow morning, and we'll send out a post to everyone, of course, so that they can go and download that. And you can request a trial if you want to use the deployment. But like we said, with the developer license, you can just go ahead and work with that, and that'll never expire, and you can use that to start building your Evolution API-based applications. That's really what I had to present here. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take those now.
Oliver, I have a few things I want to talk about. So yeah, we are going to. You've shown a lot of new features that we are building. From a developer perspective, what would be on their machine? So if we go through the installation, kind of let's sum that up a little bit as to how they would get started with writing an application and testing it on their single machine that they're using. with the developer
So
license?
for the developer license, it's going to be if you've watched any of the other webinars where we went through and set up the evolution beta at that point, that is essentially the developer license. So essentially we have a different installation for that. And to give you an idea on this, um, I think I have one sitting in a downloads folder here. So the Evolution developer install also includes a version of Apache. As we've shown before, it's set up a lot different. There's no service to deal with. None of that is there. And essentially, when you have that version of Evolution installed, you have the ability to start and stop Apache with a batch file. We've got just a icon that you double click on to start or stop Apache. And essentially, when you write your first interface and run it, you're going to see, and you just go ahead and run that, you're going to see this interface that we showed here is what you're going to start from essentially. And in most cases, the default port on a development machine is not going to be taken, and so you can just click Start Evolution, and it'll take you into the browser, and you can start testing what you're building then and there. And so it's a little bit different that way. The installer is quite a bit smaller, but it is a different installation for a deployment scenario than it is for a developer. And we'll have new versions of both of those posted into the forums on separate posts, actually.
Okay. Now we are bundling Apache because it's free and it's lightweight and it's something that is faster and easier to manage. But what about IIS? In that scenario, how will they use it with IIS?
So if you're going to use Evolution with IIS, essentially what you need to do is you need to set up, there is a module that you can use in IIS called, I believe it's called the ARR module. And it's called a forwarding proxy using the application request routing. And essentially, they have a little bit different way of going about it, but there is a module that you can install for IIS using the kind of the feature installation that is provided along with newer versions of Windows to set up this ARR module. And this is an article we've linked to before, but essentially you have the setup's quite a bit more advanced in IIS for this reverse proxying. But this article, in fact, is the one to use to take you through getting a basic reverse proxy set up. But rather than essentially two steps, changing the setting the address on the proxy pass line and then just restarting Apache. For internet or for IIS, it's quite a few more steps, but there is a guide here for that, and this guide will work as is with an Evolution server. You just have to give it the port for an Evolution server.
All right, so probably we'll need to add some documentation and some aspects of that, how to use it with IIS, because I'm sure a lot of Windows shop are using that.
Correct.
Okay. So in the wider sense, I think one of the things that we want everybody to take away from this is that when you're doing Windows and desktop development, the developer has complete control of what they're developing in terms of the code, the functional interfaces based on a certain spec, the UI design, as well as debugging that. Right now, the trend that we see that's going on in the market is that as we move more and more towards the cloud, the idea of an integrated development is kind of falling behind. And it doesn't make sense because there are so many devices out there that you will need custom UI development for those devices. And so the trend that's picking up gradually is the API development. There are a lot of companies, big companies, doing API management and API development tools, and they are very expensive. So one of the things that we are trying to get our developers and our customers to start thinking about is that how would you take your application to the web and make it available as a platform? When you're talking SaaS, if you're going to be on the cloud or in the web, there are multiple meanings of that. And one of the thing that's important to ISVs and developers is that can you make your application be a true SaaS, where it's a platform where other people can consume it, you can integrate into other people's application, other people can integrate your calls into their application. And we had shown in the Tale of Two application a couple of webinars ago how we are using an accounting system and how we are using a couple of other commercially available SaaS services into our application that we build for our customer. So when you're thinking about building a service-oriented architecture, the testing platform becomes very important because the person who's writing the back end is not the person who's writing the front end. And if sometimes there may be no communication with that person. So if you publish this API and let them test it, they won't really need any interaction with your backend developer. They will be able to continue and develop their application with it. So some of these concepts I understand, for especially for those who are in the Dataflex market, is a little bit new for them. But the direction that we are going is kind of like where the market is heading. We want to be there when a lot of people start thinking about APIs and how APIs would work and serve in the web. If you want to build an application to serve a small limited customer with a simple UI, that's fine. I mean, those applications will always be there. But these kind of tools are really useful when you're developing application in an environment where there are multiple developers, multiple tools and development languages being used, as well as building a platform. And that's the key, building a platform that serves a larger customer base. And one reason why we kind of keep harping about Apache in the mix is that Apache makes it, you can have all this front end sitting on an open source platform at a very low cost on a Linux operating system. But at the same time, what we have found is that Apache tends to be faster. I think last time we did some testing was about 30% faster than IIS, easier to manage. The reverse proxy setting that Oliver did, that he showed in the configuration that he did with only 3 or 4 items, lines of code, takes a bit of setting up in IIS, right, Oliver?
Yeah, it takes quite a bit of work.
Right. So, we would like you guys to take that away from it. I mean, if you have any questions related to this, we are open to that. The forums are there. But take a look at this new development environment that we are making it available. Try it out. Give us your feedback. Thanks for those who have been testing it out and giving us their feedback. But this is going to be a different way of programming, different way of thinking. And you will find that using the testing framework is really going to simplify your life and the people you work with who are building the front ends for you.
And this really been, there's a term in software development called dog fooding. This has really been a dog fooding experience for us too. We're using evolution in our services. So, the iteration with some of the features is, some of it has come internally as well. And certainly on various projects, one of the projects specifically I'm thinking of where we're using evolution, I see one of our front-end developers sitting there with the API testing interface up nonstop. I mean, he's just got this running all of the time. He's got that interface up and is using it constantly, and has had very little interaction with the back-end developer at all on it, because that suits his needs from the standpoint of front-end development. So, we're seeing it firsthand ourselves as well.
Any questions related to this? If not, I think we are almost towards the end of our time.
Yeah, I think we're good. Well, if you guys have any questions, you're welcome to ask in the forum as well. Like I said, we'll let you know as soon as this new version is available for download. It'll be very shortly here. And thank you all for joining us this morning, or whatever time it is for you.